Hey, what's up everyone? My name is Michael from Hustle Sheets, and today I want to show you how to build a simple project management tool inside of Google Sheets that's going to help make managing your projects a whole lot easier. And this is for any business that has a series of steps, the same series of steps that it needs to complete for every single job or project, and they have a hard time tracking where that project is and which tasks need to be taken care of next. And the way it works is by us giving a set number of days in this tab here where each task needs to be completed. So for example, from step 1 to step 2, I've put 7 days. So that means 7 days after step 1 is completed, step 2 needs to be completed, otherwise it's considered late. Every time you finish a task, you basically put in the date and then it's going to adjust based on that, right? So let's say step 1 was completed September 26th and today is September 30th. It's 4 days away, which means that it's over halfway there, right? So it's going to turn yellow. If it was completed a week prior, that means like over 12 days have gone or 11 days have gone, it's going to be considered late. If it was completed just 1 day ago, which was yesterday, it's going to be green, which means it's under 50% and you don't have to worry about it yet. And then if you put in a date here, it's going to turn light green, which means it's been completed. And then the next task is going to start counting the number of days. So basically anyone can open up this sheet and look at all the red tasks and think, okay, I need to work on these first because this is already late, and then work on the yellow and then work on the green. And also a project manager can come in and easily look at every single project and know, whether something's almost complete or it's got a long way to go, right? So it's a really effective project management tool, even though it's super simple. So I want to show you guys step by step exactly how to build this. I'm also going to be providing a download link to the template, to this exact same template that you guys can purchase, and it'll help make following this tutorial like 100 times easier. But either way, I want to show you guys step by step exactly how to build this. These are going to be the 8 steps that I use to show you guys how to build this, and then at the end I'll show you guys a couple of bonuses on how to do things like sort, notes, comments, so make sure you guys stay to the very end if you guys want. And then also there's going to be some Google Sheets principles that I think are really important that you guys learn throughout this. So it's not only learning how to build this tool, but these principles that you guys will learn are going to be really valuable to increase your work value or just help you guys create a lot more efficient tools and use Google Sheets a lot more efficiently. Okay, so let's get started, and let's start with step number 1, which is determining the steps within your project. So my example that I'm using here is one of my solar clients, and they have like 20 steps. They basically install solar panels on roofs or houses, and they have like 20 steps that they need to do, right? For every single installation, and it's hard to track where everything is because there's so many moving parts. But for this video, I've only taken 7 steps. I'm probably only going to show you guys how to build this out like 5 steps because you guys can just repeat the process yourselves. But you basically want to choose steps within your process that are worth tracking, right? So you don't want to just do every single small step. You kind of want to do the big important milestones. And the reason for that is if you just do every tiny little small step, it doesn't become realistic for someone or you to actually track this, which means that you're less likely to actually use this sheet, which makes this entire thing ineffective. So I would choose really important steps. So these are kind of like the solar steps that I have, but for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to call them step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, right? So what you'll do is you'll create a tab, and let's call it the days dictionary. And then after you determine your steps here, we'll just put them here. So I'm going to call this steps or milestones, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call it step 1, step 2, all the way until step 5, right? And then, so I'm going to call this one, actually call it starting step. Let me zoom in here. Starting step, and then I'll call this next step. And then the next step, you can put the name, but it's basically just step after step 1 is step 2, step 3, and so forth, right? And you'll see why I do this because it gets a little bit confusing, the concept of this. And then here you'll put max days, and then here you'll put 50% of the days, 50% of max days. And then let's go to our steps thing, and then this one is done now. Now we're on to determine the max number of days between each step. So what you want to do now is just decide the number of days between after step 1 is completed, step 2 needs to be completed, right? So let's say 10 days after step 1 is completed, there needs to be something in step number 2. So 10 days after this date, there needs to be something in step number 2, otherwise step number 2 is considered late, right? So that's why I kind of have this here, just to help kind of make it a bit clear, because I know it was confusing for me when I was building this for my client. So now 10 days have passed, it's considered late, and then halfway through that is going to be divided by 2. So just put like a formula to divide it by 2. Now we have our 50% mark, which means that if 5 or more days have gone by since step number 1 has been completed, then it's going to turn yellow because it's considered over 50% of the way there. If it's less than 5 days, like 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, 1, 2, 3, or 4, it's going to be considered under 50% and it's going to be this color, right? And if it's anything greater, then it's going to be red. So just put in the number of days from step 2 to step 3. So where once step 2 is finished, how many days need to pass before step 3 is considered late, right? So let's just put in some random numbers, 8, 4, okay? And then obviously after step 5, it's finished. So this is going to be your days dictionary, and we'll be using this. And you'll also want to, at the very bottom, put in today's date, and then put in the today formula, which is just today with parentheses. Now what this does, let me format this a little bit. Now what this does is it calls today's date, and we're going to be using today's date like everywhere in this, because we need to determine the number of days from today's date since the previous steps finished date, right? So if we were to use the today formula everywhere, it's going to basically call it. So if we were to like put it everywhere like this, like it would call it every single time, and it's going to slow down the spreadsheet. So instead of doing that, we're going to call the formula once, and whenever we need today's date, we're just going to reference this cell and this tab, okay? So this way it kind of saves some processing speed for the spreadsheet to not slow it down so much. So that's a small little hack for you guys. Okay, so let's just format this a little bit. Okay, and then this is basically going to be our dictionary that tells us the number of days. Now, so we finished this step now. Now the next step is going to be to create the basic columns. So we basically want to create all of these columns here on this spreadsheet. And let me show you guys how to do that. So let's open up a new tab. Let's create a new tab, and let's call this one Project Progress. I'm going to make my new tabs green so that I can easily get to them. Okay. So what we're going to do is you can start anywhere you want. I'll just start here. I'm going to call this job name, job status, and then I will put, let's see. I'm going to put step 1, whoops. I'm going to put step 1. So I'm going to put step 1, and then I'm going to put step 2. So what you're going to do is you're going to put 2 columns for every single step besides the first step. And the pattern is going to be, it's going to be the step 1 is going to be the date completed, and the second column for that same step is going to be the status. So basically our goal is to create a status, like using our formulas, create a status to either call it late, over 50%, under 50%, or completed, right? And then it's going to change the color based on whatever value that is, right? So that's kind of our goal here. That's what we're trying to do. So, and then the first one's not going to have a status because it's either going to have a date in it or not, right? And then it's going to be complete. So let's just do step 3. So each one has two columns. Step 4. Step 5. So these are kind of our basic columns, right? Like this. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to create our data validation or our dropdowns. Now for this, basically every single date, if you look in my original sheet, when you double click into a date column, it's going to have a calendar pop up. And we want to make sure that people can only enter in a date. Otherwise, if they enter in text, it's going to kind of mess up all the formulas, right? It's going to kind of break everything, and we don't want that. So the way that we do this in Google Sheets is by using data validation or drop-down menus. And we also want it for this one as well, for job status. And the reason why we have this job status is because sometimes jobs get canceled and you want to move it to the bottom or like not deal with it. But I don't recommend that you guys have like a section for canceled jobs. It's better just to sort it, and I'll show you guys how to do this at the very end, okay? But basically what you're going to do is go to all of the date columns. Let me format this a bit, make it look a little bit nicer. And then maybe I'll make it a different color. Let's make it a lighter color just for now. Okay. So for all of the date ones, and then let me also shorten the number of rows I have on this demo sheet, just so it's a little bit easier for me to navigate, okay? I'm just gonna delete all of these extra columns and rows. Okay, so what we want is on the date columns, what you're gonna do is highlight all the way down to the very bottom, and you can just press, click on the first row and press Command-Shift down arrow, like this, and it's going to highlight everything automatically to the bottom. If you're in a PC, whenever I say command, just use control instead, okay? So control shift down, right click, more cell actions, data validation. We're going to change the criteria to a date and then just hit save here. Hit save here, right? And it's going to allow us to have a pop-up. But another thing that we can do is when you select data validation, you can also reject the input. This means that if someone tries to type in anything besides a date, it's going to not let them do it, right? And then we can show a validation help text that says, must enter a date. So now what happens is, if I try to type in like a random note, some people have like what I think is a bad habit of typing in notes like where a date should be, like random note. It's going to reject it, right? So this is kind of what we want. So I think it's a good idea, but you don't have to do it that way if you don't want to. So now I can do this, right? And then depending on where you are in the world, you have different date formats. In the US, our format goes like this, and you can change it to however you want, right? So I clicked on here, so it highlights the entire row, format, number, change it to a date format, okay? Now I want to do this for all of my date columns so that when I double click into it, a date pops up. But a little hack for you guys, instead of having to go through that exact same process again, what you can do is highlight all of this, all of the rows, like in this column that's already has the data validation, copy it. So I'm pressing Command C, or you can just right click and press copy. And I'm going to go to the next date column, and I'm going to press Command V for hotkey, or I can right click and paste it, right? So let me paste it in. When I paste that in, it pastes over all the formatting exactly how it is. So now there's data validation on this. If I try to type something in, it's going to give me an issue. So that's just a way for you guys to save time. So I'm going to paste it again, and I'm going to paste it again. So all of these now have data validation. Now for the job status, I want dropdowns for completed, active, and canceled. Let me put this in alphabetical order. Active, canceled, and completed. Right, because there's going to be some conditional formatting, some color formatting based on that as well, okay? So for this, it's going to be the same thing, except instead of a date, we're going to create a new tab, and we're going to call it Dropdowns. And then here, just type in job status, and then type in the 3 values that you want: active, canceled, or completed, right? Depending on how you classify your jobs. Go back to the sheet, highlight all the way down again, right click, data validation. But this time, keep it at the criteria at list from a range, click here, and then go to dropdowns and highlight this all the way down. This way, you can go all the way down. You're likely not going to have more than 25 dropdown options, so just hit OK. Now, when I go here, I can select one, right? Like just like this. And this way, the reason why I have it done in a separate tab, it's a bit more dynamic. Whenever I want to add in a new job status category, I don't have to go and right click it or anything. I can just type in new status and it's going to automatically show up here, right? So that's another little tip for you guys. Okay, so that step is done now. Let me check this off. Now, the next thing is going to be the map, to map the status logic, right? So this formula can get a little bit tricky to determine whether something is late, completed, over, or under. So the best way to do this, I think, is to map this out, okay? So let me create a new tab here. I'm going to call this tab status mapping. Now you don't have to do this, but this is just, I think, a good way for me to kind of show how to do this. So I'm going to write here, I'm going to write status, and then we have here is late, over 50%, under 50%, and then completed, okay? And then here I'm going to put condition 1, condition 2, condition 3. Now all I'm trying to do right now is I'm trying to show you guys the logic of how we determine whether a status is late or not, okay? So going back here, now from step 1 to step 2, okay? I have 7 days. I'm gonna make it 10 just so it's easy to understand. So it's 10 days, okay? And the 50% mark is 5 days, okay? So basically today's September 30th, and if something is completed, let's say September 7th, that's like 23 days ago, right? So it's obviously going to be considered late because from today's date minus the previous step's date is 23, which is greater than 10. So it's going to be late. However, if something was completed just 2 days ago, it's going to be less than 5 days, right? So let's pick the 26th. That's 4 days ago. That's still less than the 50% mark, so it's going to be considered under 50% of the way there. However, if it was completed just 1 day prior, whoops, so that's a bug I need to fix. But I need to put less than or equal to, not just less than. So this is going to be 6 days, right? So 6 days prior to the death. So 6 days ago, step 1 was completed, which means that it's over 50% of the way there, but it's still less than 10 days, so it's not considered late yet. But if this job was completed on September 20th, like this, now it's considered late because it's been 10 days, and we've given 10 days as the benchmark, right? If it's 19th, it's still late. If it's 21st, 9 days, it's not late yet, but it's 1 day away from being late. So we need to determine the logic of how to determine when something is considered late. And the way that the first condition that we have is that the current step date column needs to be empty, okay? So under here, the condition 1 is going to be current steps date is blank, or empty is blank, right? It means it's empty, okay? So that's the first one. The second one is today minus previous steps date needs to be greater or equal to 10, right? In my example's case, or I'm just gonna call it the max number of days, right? And that's it. If those two conditions are met, then it's considered late. Now let's see what it takes for something to be considered over 50%. Okay, so the same thing, this needs to be empty because if there's something in here, then it's going to be complete, right? So this needs to be empty. So current steps date, same thing, needs to be blank. But today minus the previous date needs to be, it needs to be less than 10, but greater or equal to 5. So if it's 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, 8 days, or 9 days, it's going to be considered over 50%. As soon as it hits 10, it's going to be considered late, right? So under status mapping, we're going to say it has to be still less than the max number of days, but it needs to be greater or equal to 50% of max number of days, right? And don't just put a greater than, because then it's going to ignore the 5, which is the issue that I just had that I showed you guys, right? So this one has 3 conditions, okay? If it meets these 3 conditions, then it's going to be considered over 50%. Now for under 50%, it's the same thing. The current date needs to be blank, but today's date, so let's make it 27. But today's date minus this needs to fall in between, needs to be less than this one basically. Just that's it, less than this, and it's going to meet the criteria. So if it's 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, or 4 days, it's going to be considered under 50%, okay? So today minus the previous days, I'm just going to copy this, is less than 50%. As long as the current step date is blank and it's less than 50%, then it's considered under 50%. Now for completed, it's just going to be current steps date is not blank. That's it. Because if it's not blank, that means it's completed. It's simple as that. Okay? So let's go to the steps. Now I've mapped this status logic. Okay? So after you map this out, we basically just need to write some sort of if formula that says if these 2 conditions are true, then make that status late. Then return the value late. If these 3 conditions are true, then call it over 50%. If these 2 conditions are true, then call it under. If this one is true, then call it completed, sorry. Okay, and you might think that we might just do like a really complicated nested if formula, but that's not the case. What we actually want to use, there's a much more simple formula, and it's called the ifs formula, if you guys don't know it yet, okay? So ifs. The ifs formula is really great. You basically just give it pairs of arguments. You give it a condition, and if that condition is true, then return a certain value. That's all you're doing. So in pairs of 2, condition, value, condition, value, condition, value, okay? Which is basically what this is. Whoops. If you go to our status mapping, these 2 is considered, I know I've called it condition 1 and condition 2, but basically these combined is the condition. So this is the condition in yellow, and then in green is the value. Oops, there's no condition here. Yellow is the condition, and then green is the value, right? So that's basically how we're going to write this formula here. And the way that the ifs formula is, we're going to feed it each condition as a group, and if it's true, then it's going to return these values here, okay? And let me show you guys how to do that in a second. We're going to do this using, when there's 2 conditions, we're going to use the AND formula, okay? So the AND equals AND formula. So we're going to use a combination of the AND and the if statement, okay? So going back into our sheet here, let's kind of fill in some random data, okay? So I'm going to call this job A, job C, job B, job C, whatever. It doesn't really matter. These don't really matter. And then let's put in some start dates. Okay, I forgot to do data validation on this one. But let me just copy this. Okay, so some finish dates, just some random dates. Doesn't really matter. Okay, now this is my days dictionary here. So I've given it 10 days here, okay? So what I want to do is I want to write a formula here that basically says if today, that basically sees whether step 2 is considered if step 2 is considered late, over 50, or under 50, or complete, okay? So that's what I want to figure out. I'm gonna start with late. Okay, so these are the 4 things that I'm trying to figure out. And this is the formula that I'm gonna write, okay? So the first part is current steps date is blank. So this one is just, there's a formula called is blank, and just type in is blank. That's pretty much it. And if it's empty, if it's blank, then it just returns true, okay? And if there's something in here, then it just returns false. That's it. So that's how we're gonna do the first part. The second part is today minus the previous step's date is greater or equal to the max number of days. Now our max number of days is 10, okay? Is 10 for step 1 and step 2, which is what we're working on right now. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna zoom in, and I wanna teach you guys something here that's really important. It's how to format your formulas, okay? Now you might not think this is a big deal, but for complicated formulas like this, and it's just a good habit to just kind of write your formulas as neatly as possible. And we're gonna do this using the Option key on a Mac keyboard or the Alt key on a PC keyboard, okay? And what that does is if I press Option and Enter, it allows me to create new lines, and that's how we're gonna organize it. But first, I'm gonna write and parentheses, and then I'm gonna space it out. So basically the AND formula, you give it as many arguments as you want, and all of them have to be true in order for it to return true, okay? So if I just do this, and it's only 1, and it's true, okay? So I'm gonna put a space and a comma. Now I'm gonna put my second argument. I'm gonna put today minus this date is greater or equal to 10, okay? So this formula basically right now says what this says, okay? Now, if I were to change this to like a long date, today, if I highlight this, it's gonna tell you the value. Today minus this, right? So it's 22. Today minus this date, 22 days have passed, which is greater than or equal to 10. And this one's also blank, right? If either of these weren't true, then it's going to return false. So that's the first statement, okay? And let me just kind of add in another thing here, just so to make this a little bit. So this is late. Now we want over 50%. We want under 50%. And then we want completed. Okay. So, and then what we're going to do is we're going to write each one out separately, and then we're going to combine them all into one giant ifs formula, okay? So the next one we want now is the same as over 50%. It's today minus the previous date is less than blah, blah, blah. Okay, one thing I forgot to do. In this formula here, I'm referencing today, right? And I told you guys not to do that, but I just wanted to show you guys how it works. So I'm going to highlight this, I'm going to delete it, and then I'm going to click on Days Dictionary, and then now I'm going to click on this cell. So now it says Days Dictionary cell B8, okay? And then I'm going to delete this, and now instead of the 10, I'm going to reference this, okay? So it's the same thing. Whenever you see days, and then you also want to put $ in front of the B and the 8, so you lock it out, because we're going to drag down these cells, okay? And then we're going to lock C2. So when we drag these things down, it's not going to change the reference. We're always going to reference cell B8 and C2 for this particular step, okay? So whenever you see Days Dictionary B8 from now on, it means the today formula, okay? So this way we can just easily change this number of days, and it'll update all of our formulas, okay? Okay, so now that we have that, let's do over 50%. So it's the same thing, except that we have to change this one to less than, and then add in a third condition. Today minus previous date is greater equal to 50% of the max days, which in this case is 5, right? So let's just double click into this, copy it, double click into this. Don't just paste it in because it might make the cell reference a bit weird. So double click into it and paste in the exact same formula. Now we just have to change this sign to less than the space, okay? And then let's add in a comma. And let's grab this part where it says today minus this date, right? Now it needs to be today minus the previous date needs to be greater or equal to the 50% of the max number of days, which is 5, right? So we're going to put greater or equal to 5. Or we can just reference our sheet here and press enter. Now this is why it's super, super important to, I'm going to put dollar signs in front of the D and in front of the 2, okay? Whenever you reference anything in the days dictionary tab, it's good to you have to put dollar signs, okay? And you know what? Let me change this tab name to days so it's a bit shorter. So this way now the formula looks a little bit easier, okay? It says days. So when it says days, we're referencing this tab. So now this is the criteria now. Now we're still only working on using these two as the example here. This is what we're working with. Now it's going to return true if it's late, and now it's going to return true if it's over 50%, right? So if today's September 30th and we change it to the 21st, that's 9 days away. It's not late yet. So now it's going to be over 50%. This one's now going to return true, right? Now we need to do the under 50% logic. So now under 50% logic is the same thing, except that today minus the previous step's date is less than 50% of the max of the days. So this is really simple. Let's double click into here. We're going to copy this formula, double click here. We're going to paste that and make sure, this is why it's important to write things neatly, because you can actually see the middle criteria. Let's remove that out because this refers to the max number of days. We just want where today minus this date is less than the 50% mark is here. So now if step 1 was finished here, 28th, which is only 2 days ago, now this is going to return true, right? And that's what we want. Now for completed, it's super simple. For completed, it's just one condition. Today's current step days is not blank. So if we go here and I write is blank, and I reference this cell, it's true, right? But if I just put a not formula around it, not basically makes the formula the opposite, okay? Let's see the actual definition. Yeah, it returns the opposite of a logical value, okay? So if I just wrap it in a not formula, so not is blank, basically not blank. If I just put anything here, now this is going to return true. So basically, this is going to be our if statement, okay? And the first one that evaluates, so if this is true, return this. 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 So now here, I'm going to type in ifs. Now, again, this is where it's super important to use Option Enter or Alt Enter if you're in a PC. I want one row for every condition and the value. Every condition and the value, okay? So this way, when you need to edit this formula in the future, it's going to be super simple. So now I just need to go in here and paste this, okay? Now, this is where it's good to open this sheet on a separate tab, so you have 2 tabs open. So I don't have to click out of this formula, right? But I can go in here and double click into here and highlight everything except for the for the equal sign here. So you see this, everything except for the equal signs. And then you can just paste this in here. So this entire thing is considered one condition, okay? The entire and formula, it's and this is true and this is true. Space, comma, now I put in the value if this is true. I'm going to put late in quotation marks and then a space. You want everything spaced out properly so that it's easy to read. Now I'm going to press Option Enter. You can close this little helper thing. Go back to my new tab. Whoops, press Escape. double click into this, copy everything again, paste this in. I don't know why there's so many extra spaces here. Just one extra space is enough. Space, comma, in quotation marks, over 50%. Space, comma, option enter, press escape, double click into here, paste this in, space, comma, this one is under 50%, space, comma, enter, and the last one is here, completed. Now, you're done here, right? So there's no more comma, but what I recommend you do is press option, enter twice, and then the close parentheses, okay? Now I can delete all this stuff because I don't need it. You can double click into here, highlight all of this formula. You can delete it now, double click into here and paste it in, okay? So now we have this formula that we need, right? So if I delete this, late, over 50%, under 50%. Now, and then let me change this back to white. And now you can probably guess that one of the later steps is going to be doing conditional formatting. If this cell is this value, like under 50%, then make these two green, right? That's basically the trick of this, okay? But before we get there, we need to drag this formula all the way down, okay? Let me click out of the other tab so it doesn't look weird. So the problem when we drag this all the way down is it's going to show late because it calculates all of this. We only want this formula to run if step 1 has a date in it, okay? And the way that we do that, let me delete everything else, is double click into this formula. This is why it's important, again, to have a separate, have it organized. After the equal sign, type in if, parentheses, D6, which is, or just click here, equals blank is 2 quotation marks. So I'm saying if this cell is blank, right? If it's true, so now I put a comma. If it's true, return nothing, empty quotation marks. If it's not true, then run this entire formula. So I'm saying if D6 is blank, then just leave it blank. Otherwise, run this formula. And now I'm going to click here and press option enter again and press enter, okay? So now when I drag this formula down, this formula is here, but it's not showing anything unless there's going to be something in this cell, okay? So that's what we want. So this formula is going to be dragged all the way down, and you can probably foresee some small issues with this, as in someone can easily accidentally delete this formula and it's not going to run, right? So that's kind of like the issue with doing this. There's a better way of doing it, which is using array formulas. I'm not going to go over it in this video because it's a little bit complicated, but I'm going to have a link in the video in the description below where you guys can purchase like a premium course where I make a super advanced version of this kind of project management sheet where I kind of use array formulas so that no one can accidentally delete these rows, right? So it's a lot better way, but it's super advanced. But for now, this will do. Just make sure that you check if these formulas are deleted. If someone deleted this formula, for example, by accident, right, you can just go to the one above it and drag it down. So it's a pretty simple fix, okay? Okay, so now that we have this finished, let's go to our steps. So we finished our status formula. Now we need to build out the status formula for each step, okay? Now this is basically just changing the references from the previous step to the next step, right? So let me delete this little helper column that I made. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click into here and I'm going to highlight everything. Let me press Command A to highlight everything. I'm going to copy everything. Now I'm going to double click into here and paste this in. Now you're going to notice something. Right now this says that it's under 50%. Okay, wait, hold on. So the first thing you want to do is you want to change the references, right? We're going to keep D6 the same everywhere we go because we only want these formulas to run if there's something in step 1. But okay. Well, there's a couple ways of doing this, okay? The first thing we're going to do is this criteria says if E6 is blank, right? If step 2 date is blank, but we really now that we're in the step 3 status, we want to see if this column is blank, which is G6. So everywhere we're going to change E to G. So instead of step 2 date, we want step 3 date, right? So E to G, everywhere you see it. Now instead of subtracting today minus step 1 date, we're going to do today minus step 2 date, which is E6. So we're going to change everything that we see D6 to E6. This is where you need to be very, very careful and precise with what you're doing, okay? Okay. Done. And then now we also have to change the reference of days, because here I'm referencing days cell C2, which is 10, right? That's the number of days that we've given from step 1 and step 2. But now we're working from step 2 to step 3, which is going to have a different deadline, which is 7 days. And this is actually referencing cell C3 and D3 for 50% for this one, right? So what we're going to do is go back to our here. And everywhere where we see day C2 or D2, we're going to change it 1 row up to 3. And then, let me see. So instead of saying if D6 is empty, now we only want to run this formula, not if there's nothing in step, not depending on what's in step 1, but what's on step number 2, right? Because step 3 can't be late because step 2 hasn't even started yet, right? So to fix that, instead of saying if D6 is empty, we're going to make it if E6 is empty, then don't even run it. However, as soon as we put something here, then it's going to start calculating where step 3 is, okay? So another thing you guys might want to do is you might want to group the status columns. Because if you see here in my original, you don't need to look at the status, okay? But we need it to do the coloring because this color is going to tell you what it is. So you see here, I've grouped everything so I can just remove it, okay? So if I go to the project progress, I can right click, the status ones. I can right click it, click on the column, right click it, and then go to group column. Now you can open or close it like this, okay? And another thing I like to do is I like to change all my formula cells gray so that I know it's a formula, okay? So that might be a little bit helpful. This is not, there's no formula yet, but so like this. Now, for step 4 status, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to copy it, so double click into it, double click into this, and paste it in. And so instead of referencing if E6 is blank, we're only going to run it if the next step date is blank, which is G, right? So it's G. And then instead of checking whether this one is blank here, we're going to take this one step at a time. It's if this one is blank. So everywhere else you see a G6, turn it into I. So we're referencing this one, okay? Let me insert some more columns here because it makes it easier. When you give it more space, then the entire formula row will show up and it makes it easier to read. So everything's on one line because this box is bigger, right? So we changed it to G6. Now, today minus E6. Wait, did we change that? Okay, so this is where it's like you have to really keep track of this, where cell B8 is minus E6. So we've changed E6, right, to the step 2 date here. So I'm on step 3, yeah. So it's today minus E6, and this one is today minus D6. Okay, good. I got a little bit confused. Now we need to change, instead of having it say days C3 cell, it's going to be C4, right? Because now we're doing from step 2 to step 3. So, whoops, days. Where's my days? Okay, so now we are checking from step 2 to step 3. So if I go to project progress, step 3 status is, so right now it's referencing cell C3. So from 2 to 3, project progress. Okay, so now it's referencing, okay, so this is referencing D2, which is correct. D2, and now I want to reference, sorry, I'm getting a little bit confused, but this one looks correct. Oh, okay, because I was working on this one. Okay, yeah, this is where it gets confusing, right? So I'm gonna put this little marker here so I know where I'm working. Okay, so we've changed this. Now we need to do days B8, which is today, right? Minus, right now it says minus step 2, right? But we're on step number 4. We want to subtract from the step 3 date. So we're going to change all the E's to G's. Okay, and that's done here. And then, oh, right here too is an E. Okay, so make sure you don't forget. Okay, so this one is done here. Now, instead of referencing cell day C3, which is 7, because now we're working on step 4, right? So it's a number of days from 3 to 4, from steps 3 to 4, which is here. It's 8 days in this case. So it's going to be cell C4 and D4, right? So when we go here, change everything that's C3 to C4 and D3 to D4, like this. Okay. There we go. Now we can drag this formula all the way down. And if step 3 has a date, then it's going to start calculating. If there's nothing in step 3, it's not going to calculate. Okay, cool. Now for the last one, same thing. Let me just make this white so I know that I'm working on this one. Double click into here, paste this here. Okay, I'm going to add some more columns. So again, I can scroll over. Okay, I'm going to do this one last because it's confusing me. I don't need to know if this one is blank. I need to know, because I'm working on step 5, I need to know if K is blank, right? So if I'm going to change everything that's referencing I to K. Okay. And then instead of subtracting step 3 date, I want to subtract step 4 date, which is I. So I'm changing everything that is G to I. Including the first one. Cool. And then everything that's C4, I'm just going to make it one row up from days C4 and D. Okay, done. Perfect. And then I can drag this formula all the way down. And if I put something in here, then that's going to work. Then let me just remove this little marker. All right, so we did it. So that was probably the hardest step. So if you got through that, congrats. We basically have all of the hard work done, okay? Now, let's go to our steps. Boom. The next thing we want to do now is conditional formatting. So let's go to here. So basically what we're going to do is, okay, so first of all, for step 1, the first thing we're going to do is, if there's anything in step 1, we're just going to make it the completed green color, okay? So you're just going to highlight step 1 all the way down to the very bottom. Go to format, go to conditional formatting. I'm going to move myself over here. This one's the easiest. It's literally the default one. It's if it's not empty, then just make it this, okay? It's super simple. Now, so basically if anything is here, you're gonna know it's completed based on the color, right? Now for step 2, for this one here, so I liked the way that I highlighted this. So I'm working on these columns now. Highlight these 2 columns and hit add another rule, or if this isn't open yet, just go to format, highlight it, and conditional formatting. It's going to automatically give you the range that you're highlighting. And then we're going to go to format the rules, change this to a custom formula. And what we're going to say is if whatever is in column F is completed, then we're going to make it this color, this green here. If it says under 50% in column F, we're going to make it bright green. If it's late, we're going to make it red. If it's over 50%, we're going to make it the other color. But let me just have a date so that we have one for every color so I can show you that it works. Okay, so what you're going to do is type in equals F6 to F. So F6 to F, which means anything from this range. In custom formula and conditional formatting, the first equal, basically read it as if. So I'm saying if F6 to F equals completed, and you need to put the completed in quotation marks. We're going to keep it this color, right? But you're going to put $ in front of the F and the 6 and then the second F right in front of it. Now it's going to be green. Now, and then you're going to hit add another rule, and you're just going to change inside the quotation marks to under 50%. And if it's under 50%, we want it to be this color. Add another rule. You're going to delete what's in here and change it to late. Make it bright red. Okay. Add another rule. Over 50%. If it's over 50%, we want it yellow, right? And then you're done. Okay. So now you can see here, well, over 50%, voila, and we're done. Now, as you can probably guess, we're going to repeat this step for every single pairs of columns, right? So now I'm working here. I'm going to highlight this one, this color. Highlight this all the way down. And it sucks with conditional formatting. It's a bit tedious, but you have to do it this way. Okay, you basically have to. You can't just format things. As far as I know, there's no shortcuts. So you have to highlight it, add another rule, but it's not that hard. Just write custom formula. Wait. Okay, add another rule, custom formula. Equals. Well, I liked to kind of have some dates in here so you guys can actually see the effect of it. Otherwise, you guys might not believe that it works. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to either highlight the range where you want the coloring to happen, and I want to highlight color both. Custom formula equals, it's from H6, this is H6 and down, equals quotation marks completed. Now it's not going to work. It's only going to highlight this one if you don't put the $signs. Okay, and if it's late, then if it's late, it's going to be bright red, under 50%, it's going to be green. If it's over 50%, then it's going to be yellow, and done. Okay. Now you guys can pretty much just do this for the rest of the steps. Okay. I won't kind of do it in this video, but I think you guys pretty much get the idea. I might do it later if I feel like it. Okay. So now that we have this done, let's go to steps. We're pretty much done. This is basically it, right? Well, let's pretend we only have 3 steps. Now in the template that I have, I'm going to give you guys more steps so it's a bit easier, but I don't want this video to go so long and you guys just watch me do conditional formatting. So I'm just going to delete this. We're going to pretend that this is it, okay? And then you can basically group this. So this is a 3-step process for your company. And we can just delete the dates from it. Status and status, okay? So this is basically it. Now there's one more group of conditional formatting that I want to add in, and that's if you go back to my original, you'll see here that if I make something canceled, it's going to automatically turn everything gray. If I make something completed, it's going to turn everything green. Okay, so let's add that part. That part's important. So what you're going to do is highlight everything. Let me move myself again. Go to Format, and then go to Conditional Formatting. And then we're going to add in a rule, another rule, and the range is from B to H, which is good. Custom formula, same thing. But now it's going to reference column C. If C6 to C equals completed, put the dollar signs to lock it in. Whoops. Then it's going to be this color. Let's add another rule. Okay. For canceled, if it's canceled, then it's going to be this. Okay. Now you'll see here it's going to work here, but it's not going to work here. It's only going to change these colors, right? And the reason is because I'm going to highlight everything by clicking here. You go to Format, Conditional Formatting. When you highlight everything, it shows you all the rules for everything. And the reason is because the conditional formatting works based on the first rule first. So the first rule takes precedent. So it basically overrides everything else. So what you want to do is take the ones that we just wrote that highlights the entire row, and we're going to make it override everything by bringing it all the way to the top. So knowing that it doesn't scroll and you kind of have to yeah. So now you'll see here, if it's canceled, it overrides, okay? Great. Okay, so now we want to add a little bit of kind of some formatting to make it look a bit nicer. Maybe some borders. Some borders here. Maybe some inside borders to make it look just a little bit nicer. Something like this, right? And then you'll see here that I have these scorecards that basically just count the numbers, which is kind of helpful, right? You see how many tasks are in which status. I think it's kind of nice. So we'll do that here. We'll call this one, let's minimize this for a second so I know how it actually looks. Oh, let's add in the border here. Like this, okay? So we're gonna call this one late. We'll call this one over 50%. We'll call it under 50%. And we'll call this completed. Okay. And then let's just expand these two. What you're going to do is use the count if formula. So count ifs, and then just highlight everything all the way down. Wait, sorry. Don't highlight job status. Just highlight from step 1 to the last step. Okay, comma. This is just going to count the number of cells that have a certain text. And we're going to put in quotation marks, late. Boom, just like that. Okay, and we're going to center it, and then we're going to make this bigger, make it like size, I don't know, 18 or something. Whoops. We're going to center this, and then we are going to give it a little border like this, right? And then we can copy this format all the way here. And then we're going to double click into this formula, double click into this cell, we're going to paste it in, and we're going to change what's in the quote to over 50%. And then same thing to under 50%, same thing to completed. Whoops. And the main reason why is I didn't want to count these cells, right? And then let's change the coloring so that people actually so that people can actually understand what these colors mean. So let's just give them a little legend. Obviously, it's not how mine looked, but I mean, it's pretty good, I think. So it's going to look like this, right? So this is, I know this is a super miniature version, but I think you guys basically get the idea of how to do this. And the last thing I want to show you guys is kind of how to deal with notes, right? So a lot of times people kind of have what I think is a bad habit of putting text where only numbers should go. So if we didn't lock the validation, someone might put the reason why this is blocked is because blah, 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 blah. A bunch of random notes, right? And they'll put it in here and it's going to mess up everything, but we blocked them from doing that. But, everyone needs to put in notes somewhere. So what I recommend is you guys, there's two ways. Well, you guys should use both, but put in a notes column, a column called notes here. And let's just drag it out. And then we'll just make it the same format as everything else, right? And then just make them type in the notes this way, right? So this job is blah blah blah, right? Blah 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 blah. Maybe we need to add in some bordering in the middle as well, so people know. So this is notes here, right? And then if it goes past here, you have two options. So click here, highlight the entire column, row wrapping. You can either wrap it. I don't love this because it changes the size of this, but it's up to you. But I would probably just clip it so that it just unclips and then they can click on it and read it here. Okay, that's one way. The second way is to leave comments. So let's say this was red and you want to leave a comment exactly here. Just right click it, hit comment, and then say this is late because I didn't do my job or whatever. And then just hit comment. Now there's always going to be a yellow flag wherever you see a comment. Someone else can reply, someone's reply. You can see exactly who did it and what time. And when it's done, you can just resolve it by clicking check. So that's the best way, okay? Now the second thing is sorting. Now with sorting, it's going to be mostly to do with, let's say you complete a bunch of jobs. You cancel a bunch of jobs, right? So with sorting, you want to move the cancel jobs away from your view because it's not really important anymore, right? So what you want to do is, a lot of people have the habit of maybe wanting to cut and paste. Now, I don't recommend cutting and pasting in this sheet because there's conditional formatting and it kind of makes it really kind of convoluted and complicated. So instead, what you're going to do is you're going to use filterings, okay? So you're going to sort it by filtering. So click on the header, but I recommend you do more than that. I recommend you first highlight everything and then click on the filter. Now this filter is going to always be on. And what you're going to do is you're going to sort everything by the step 1 date, which means the oldest job is going to be up top. So sort it here, A to Z, and then click on job status and sort it here. Okay. So now since A comes first, canceled and completed, it's going to sort it that way. So active jobs are always going to be up top, canceled and then completed. So that's the best way I recommend that you guys do this. Nothing's perfect and there's always going to be trade-offs, but I do think this is the next best way to go about it. Maybe you want to center everything like this so it looks nice. So there you have it, guys. This is basically how to create a project management tool like this. I hope you guys follow along. I know some of it got a little bit complicated towards the middle, but these are really great things to learn. Yeah, so I hope this was helpful. You guys can also, like I mentioned, there is a template in the description below that you guys can purchase or download, and it's going to be easy to follow along. It's going to have a lot more steps than 3. It's just so you guys can basically go in and just change your days dictionary and it just to whatever steps you guys have, and hopefully save you guys a lot of time. Secondly, I take consultation calls in the link in the description below. So if you guys want to book a paid consultation call where I kind of go over any sheets or projects that you guys might want to have, You guys can do it that way. Besides that, please leave a comment below to let me know if this was helpful. If you guys have any questions about this, any issues that you have building this, just let me know. And if you guys have any other types of spreadsheets that you guys want to see me build or show you guys how to build, just leave it in the comment below. Okay, guys? And make sure to like and subscribe because it makes me want to create more videos like this. All right, thanks a lot.